Hi guys, fellow educators and school leaders. I'm Avinash. I'm co-founder of Tomo Club, where we prepare schools for tomorrow. And in our podcast series today, we have Dr. S, uh, Leslie Sparcello, and she's the superintendent at Setter International Schools. And it's an absolute honor to have you here, Dr. S. Today, we have a very interesting
You?
topic in our hand about professional development of educators on AI tools. And before we dive into it, I would love if you can introduce yourself. I know it's a you don't need an introduction, but still, if for our audience, if you can, give us a quick snapshot.
My name is Leslie Sparacello, Dr. Leslie Sparacello. I am, like he said, the superintendent of Cedars International. We're a charter district in Central Texas in Austin. This is my 35th year in education and started as an English and French teacher, worked my way up through academic dean, campus level principal, spent most of my time in traditional ISDs, 31 years. The last 4 years, I have been in charter schools, and I'm really loving it. So that's been my journey.
No, absolutely. So before we discuss like or get a deeper understanding of this topic, I'll ask more philosophical why. So when you hear about artificial intelligence in education, what's the first word or what's the first idea that come to your mind?
The first thing that comes to my mind is individualization
Okay, that
and maybe feedback,
hmm.
individualized feedback. I know that's not one word, but that's what I think of.
No, that makes sense. For sure, I think personalization has been a long-standing intent of so many technologies, so many school districts. But I think finally we have a technology in place which can make it happen and not put the burden entirely on school teachers to prepare for hours. But yeah, I think
Yes.
that's definitely an interesting take. I think something related to it, if AI could solve like your one most pressing problem in your school today, what would you choose
hmm
and why?
Well, I think our most pressing problem is just big learning gaps, especially for our SPED and our second language learners.
Mm,
So closing those gaps, if it helps us to give quicker feedback, more individualized feedback, then we can close those gaps. That's really our biggest problem.
mm. No, absolutely. I think, especially I think in Austin, it's still a urban center, so there is definitely a
Yes,
lot more diverse population of students, and a lot of them
for sure.
are actually coming from household where English is not a first language, so it becomes even more difficult to get them along
Yes.
um, in the classroom. So yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. But like beyond the school settings, like have you personally also experimented with AI, like in your day-to-day life, either as a leader or as for your team or for yourself? Have you
Oh my
explored?
goodness, yes. Chat GPT has absolutely saved my life this year. I'm really not sure how I would have made it with it through this year without it because this was a particularly challenging year for me. Only my second year as superintendent, and if people aren't aware, charters have to renew every 10 years,
Yeah.
and it's a very long, difficult application. And so I had that. We were trying to add pre-K 3. We were part of teacher incentive allotment, and our initial application for that was denied. But so we had to go back through. I mean, and that meant thousands and thousands of dollars that our teachers wouldn't get if I didn't get that right. And so with the help of I was able to throw all the metrics together and say, okay, help me to
Hmm.
meet these metrics so that I'm going to pass this test and get this money for our teachers. So there were just all kinds of things like that I mean, it wasn't just that it was time saving, it was really almost like having a coworker, a partner to help me get through these really, really difficult applications.
Wow, now that's a very solid application you have found there for AI. And
Mhm.
but while you were doing this, were you able to also identify a few limitations, where you think that, oh, I think it's not working out for me.
Sure. I work a lot with data. and spreadsheets. And, AI is still a little bit limited if you don't have it in the format where it can read it. Like an individual can look at a spreadsheet that's laid out a certain way and realize that, oh, that row goes with the row below it. And
Mhm.
AI is still a little bit limited in that. So I have had some very frustrating days and trying to get it to do some of the things that I wish it could do for me. But, I'm learning too, but it does have a few limitations for sure.
No, absolutely. But I think I have to talk to you after the call because like I use a lot a product called Claude, and
Uh-huh.
of course, ChatGPT and Gemini has worked a lot better for me in documentation and strategizing. But
Hmm.
when in terms of more technical work around spreadsheets or data, Claude has been my savior, big time.
Oh, nice,
So,
nice. Well, I think what I have found with AI, and I think what will be a challenge with some of our students is you still currently, I feel like, have to have a basic sort of conceptual understanding of what you're doing so that you give good prompts to AI. Because if you give good prompts, you get good results.
yeah,
If you don't give good prompts, you may not get back what you want. And I think that's super important is being able to conceptually understand what you really want so that you can explain it so that you can get what you want.
yeah. No, I remember like when I was in school, there was a saying called Google search is an art, you know, how you your
Yes.
way. It's similar, like finding your way through AI in the best way. And also about how do you analyze the output, how do you
Yes.
um, remain critical about its potential limitation, biases, hallucinations, and still able to be conscious about it and kind of being a constructive criticism for yourself on that. So you cannot,
Yeah, that's very
yeah,
true. I have actually told AI you're lying to me. Give me the link where you found that information because that is not the truth.
yeah,
And it's always very polite and apologizes. Oh, you're right. That was not the right number. This is the right number. So I always give people a cautionary tale that, yeah, absolutely. You call it hallucination. I tell it it's a liar sometimes. Like, you are lying to me. That is not accurate.
but I think there's a difference because it's not lying with a malicious intent. It's like it thinks that that's the truth, and hence it's a
Yes.
hallucination. So that's the difference.
Yes.
What about your educators? Like, have you given a thought about your educators using AI, or have you guys talked about it?
Yeah, we actually just this spring purchased an AI platform for our teachers that will help them write lesson plans, help them create different activities. We're a project-based learning district, and so we don't use a lot of textbooks. We don't, do a lot of rote things. Our kids are very hands-on. They're given a problem, they're given an objective, and then they're doing research to solve it. But teachers have to develop that project with what the outcomes should be based on our TEKS, which are our standards here in Texas. And so we purchased a platform to do that, and we're starting to train them. We kind of let the pioneers, like, here you go, like, here it is, just play with it in the spring because anytime you give teachers anything new, after the school year has started, you run the risk of a riot.
Oh
And
yeah.
I understand that as a teacher, it's like, no, I have started my school year. I have my plans. Don't give me anything new. So we let the pioneers kind of play with it. And then at the end of the school year, we had a PD day where we paid them to come in and we really were hands on, right? Like, let's have you delve into the platform. What I find with teachers, if you give them like a little taste of something right
Mm.
before they go home for summer, and they get a chance to play with it on their own in the summer, they're much more open-minded about it in the fall. So we'll do more trainings in the fall, more directed trainings, but I just really wanted to whet their appetite and get them to play with it. So we wanted to give them a little tease, right? Like, you're going to go home and be working on some lesson plans this summer for the fall, working on some projects. Here's a tool. Let's play around with it. And then hopefully when we come back in the fall, I really like using my educators as my trainers
Mhm.
because when you can get one third grade teacher to talk to other third grade teachers, there's just a lot more street cred in terms of, yeah, it really works.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that peer-to-peer learning is also very realistic, where they talk about
Yes.
direct, those kind of tips and tricks of find their workaround and more
Yeah.
the more application driven discussions that they do, because they know not
Yes.
waste time of their fellows, because they will be honest
No.
that, hey, it's not making sense. So they'll have
Right.
honest.
Right. Well, and they also share pitfalls, right? Like, oh my gosh, it took me half a day messing with this and I did it wrong. And then when I did this, it took 30 seconds. So they will give each other hacks and they love that.
Yeah. Which tool, by the way, you guys are training on?
We purchased Magic School AI.
Hmm. No,
So
absolutely.
that's what we're going to work with this year and see how it goes for us.
No, no, makes sense. Totally makes sense. But just want to understand, like, before you were thinking of implementing anything for your teachers, it's very crucial to understand your team's pulse, like, did you conduct
Mhm.
any internal assessments to gauge the AI readiness, like if they were curious, cautious, or perhaps already experimenting? And what insights did you uncover about their current perceptions?
We didn't do any kind of survey or anything like that. Like Magic School AI came to my attention through some trainings with other superintendents and other campus leaders. And when they started talking to me about what they were doing and what they were using it for, and what I could see was the utility it would have to just absolutely both save teachers time and effort, which always makes for a happier, group,
Of course.
and also differentiate and give quicker feedback to students, which always makes for better results. It's just seemed like the best world. So that's why we brought it back. I'm always my leadership style is one of really taking advantage of your pioneers, right? So I'll bring something and I know my people. And so I know the people to take it to and say, I need you to play with this, or look, I got you something.
Yeah.
And then they naturally just go with it. And then their excitement, like, as the leader, you're never a prophet in your own land. Like I can come and I can tell you it's the greatest thing in the world, but no, you're just the
Yeah.
superintendent and you don't have students and you don't have to write lesson plans, and they're right. So I have to find somebody within my culture that I know they respect
Mhm.
and somebody who will run with it. And then I give it to them and then plant them in the group
Mhm.
and let it just infect the others, It's maybe a little sneaky, but it works.
No, absolutely. It's not sneaky. I think it's more like identify those early.
Strategic. How about that?
Yes, that's a better way to say it. Or the early adopters. Um, in any industry, in any segment, there are always some early adopters who
Yes.
actively, and then there is like a Gaussian curve where the mass audience lies in the center.
Mm.
Of course, there are some laggards who gonna be the last
Always.
bloomers. But yeah, I think the speed at which AI is changing, you can't afford to be the late boomers in the
No.
for sure.
No, you'll really be left behind if you're not at least trying.
Yeah. And I think in a lot of district that I'm talking to, the budget constraints is the biggest problem right now. There is so much uncertainty from
For
state
sure.
to federal funds. Right now, the use of AI makes much more sense from the point of view of efficiency, as a
Yes.
because it's you won't have money to hire more folks, but the same set of folks have to work more. So the best way is
Hmm.
that you start using some technologies that can, take up things from your
Hmm.
plate and do it faster, because you have to work around the
Yes.
same bigger problem with less money.
Yes, for sure. Well, and just engaging students as well, because, they're digital natives.
Mm,
And even though, we're more than happy to pick up a book or write on a worksheet or whatever, it feels natural to us. What engages them is very different, and AI can move at the pace that they're moving at and give them resources and things that invite them to join versus things
mm,
that don't incite them at all.
interesting. So, but I get it. You didn't do any AI assessment prior. But what was the initial
Mhm.
reaction? Like, was it like rejecting or more like neutral, more positive? What has been the overall vibe, if I can ask?
I think it's been what I expected it to be. It's kind of like, yeah, this is cool, but terrible timing, right?
Okay.
When we first brought it in, and then when we did the summer workshop, or right, because we did it like the day after school was out. Students are gone, teachers are still, they're a little tired,
Mhm.
but and we paid them to come so that that would help entice them to be there. But the excitement in the room when they were able to play with it. And I think that's the piece. It wasn't talking about it anymore. It was, no, everybody's here. And we tied it to making their plans for next year, because part of what their expectation is to make plans for next year, like get your scope and
Yeah.
sequence, get your things started. And so it was kind of like we sold it as a, look, we're going to help you get this done and get it done faster. And so and then they were sharing those tips and tricks with each other and like, oh my gosh, it's doing this, I can do that.
Yeah.
And so it brought some real energy to it. I think the true test will be when we get back in the fall, because not everybody came to those workshops. So, they're going to be in different places,
Right.
and we're going to have to lay out the expectations of, the plan for this year.
Mhm.
But that, like I said, having them come in and play around with it, actually using it to create something that they had to do anyway,
Yeah.
was helpful.
No, absolutely. I think must have been a good site. Um, so what I'm thinking about is that since we're working with a lot of states, Texas, as in right now, Texas Education Agency, it has acknowledged interest in AI, but it hasn't issued any formal guidance. So a lot of districts
Right.
kind of finding their own rules. But as a charter school,
Yes.
we often have more flexibility, you know. So how has that
True.
autonomy influenced your decision? That you have proactively explored AI, but there is no broader direction.
Mhm.
So how has you guys figured out your way in this?
Well, I think regardless of whether TEA is telling you what to do or not, our main concern has always got to be student safety. So when you talk about AI, it's about really vetting programs to make sure that while students are able to access information and do things at a better speed and get better feedback, that you're also keeping them safe, number one. But number two, you're also using a program that has systems and control to
Mhm.
not allow them to get information without learning, because I think that's been a lot of educators' fear around AI. It's like, oh, well, if they're just going to go Google it. Before AI was there, it was like they're just Googling things and they're copying and they're pasting it in, and we're having to find software to vet out like what is their work and what is not their work. So, you know, um, we have been more focused around, let's make sure that whatever we're doing with students in AI, that it's still forcing them to do the work. It's still forcing them to think. Um, and it might be making the process for them faster. I mean, nobody carries a calculator around in their hand anymore. We have, a phone, or we have, you can just ask chat or whatever version of AI you use to do something for you quickly. And a lot of it is just getting over that. But at the same time, what I was saying earlier is, if the student just gets an answer and they don't conceptually understand how that came about, then you're missing the point, which is the learning. And
Yeah.
so we've just tried to be very focused around that, and we want to use it, we want to embrace it. It's not going away. So it's not like we can cross our arms and be like, we're not doing that because you're not going to learn. We have to figure out how you can. It's got to be both and, not either or.
Yeah.
We have to figure out how you can use AI as a learning tool, as a productivity tool, but it doesn't take away your thinking. It doesn't take away your learning responsibilities.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I think you're right. If the AI can be more like a hand holding part, it can really deliver much more value. And even if there is no directive around it from the state, the biggest thing is those students are anyways using AI for whether it's their assignments or whether
Absolutely.
like the biggest use case, I was just reading about it lately, has been around relationships and mental health. They're asking
Yes.
so many questions to AI about supporting in their emotional journey. Um,
Mm-hmm.
then parents are asking so many questions to the teachers, because teachers becomes the central piece whenever they have anything to ask, and they become the
Mm-hmm.
representative in a way. So they're asking them about AI tutors or different methodologies of using AI. That it's high time that teach, like, you don't want to play a catch up game like we did it in social media.
Right.
So you want to be.
Well, it can really be the great equalizer. I mean, I look at it in a positive light that way. Our students we're 85% socioeconomically disadvantaged. So most of our students come from, very poor backgrounds. They don't have rich enrichment things that a lot of kids have, that would help them learn. And this is a way that we can close that gap and give them the same opportunities going forward. So we don't want to, especially with our lower socioeconomic students, we don't want to handicap them by not allowing them to do the things that their peers have access to.
Makes sense. Okay, so I have another very interesting question around the implementation part. Like we discussed your insights till now, but when you're exploring a potential implementation, a new program,
Mhm,
platform, or a partnership, how do you
mhm.
typically evaluate them? What's your process of vetting and selecting edtech solutions?
Um, Well, I mean, a lot of times the way they come to my attention is through my peers. So I am talking to other superintendents or district level employees or regional service center people, that they introduce something that they're excited about. And
Mhm.
they're usually excited about it because they've had some modicum of success, like they were trying to solve a problem and this technology solved that problem for them. Being a superintendent, we're always talking about budgets, right? So how
Yeah.
can I solve that problem for the least amount of money? And so that's usually how something lands on my plate is I'm talking to a peer and they are recommending it, or I've gone to some, workshop or some conference or something and I see it. But even if I see it there and it hasn't been recommended, I'm still going to go back to my peers and be like, is anybody else using this? Have you had success with it? I really want to know that the people that I trust that are doing the same work that I'm doing are getting results from this. And if they tell me they're getting results, then my next step is to look at how that particular technology matches with the need that I have. Is it only going to answer a piece of the need? Is
Mhm.
it going to take care of the entire need? Is it that I'm going to have to buy something else to complement it and that's going to cost more money?
Mhm.
Am I going to have to do a lot of training around it? How intuitive is it as a program? Because to me, that's super important. The longer I get in my career, the shorter patience I have for
Mhm.
training, to be
Yeah.
quite honest. Like, I need to know in a few sentences how to do this. Like, if I need a manual this thick or a 3-day training to do something, it is probably not going to pass the muster with me. It's probably going to get knocked off the table. Um, because it's just teachers are so, and especially for teachers, when I'm getting something for teachers because they are so pressed for time, they feel such pressure, especially with standardized testing and those sorts of things. They need something that works, that is not difficult and complicated or complex. And so that's another factor for me. Honestly, that factor supersedes finances. I will pay more for a
Mhm.
more intuitive program than for something that's cheap, but it's just going to create frustration in my staff.
Yeah. Okay. Those are very interesting points. You said easy to implement, so lower training,
Hmm.
recommended, of course, by your peers or by other superintendents. You were
Hmm.
mentioning about this workshop that you did, how you got. So, tell me more about it. What was that workshop?
So, where I learned about Magic School AI was at TASA, the Texas Association of Secondary Administrators. They have a conference once a year, or a couple times a year actually, but this particular conference is really heavily attended by all school leaders. So from superintendents and central office people to principals and assistant principals. And it was actually a couple of campus level principals that I was having dinner with that from another district, a couple of other districts, who mentioned what they were doing with AI and with the success that they were having. And, as superintendents, sometimes we can be disconnected. So I really love talking to campus level people and principals and instructional coaches and teachers, the people who are on the ground doing the work.
Mhm.
Because I like principals because they're kind of right in that perfect sweet spot.
Yeah.
They're going into the classrooms, they're working with the teachers, they're hearing the teachers daily, what they like and what they don't like, but they have that global, they're backed out of it globally enough
Yeah.
that they can see, okay, that one teacher hates it, but these five other teachers love it. And so it can give you some tips on how to bring that one teacher on board. So I feel like campus level principals, they have the hardest job in education to me. I think I've got it much easier now than they do. I've graduated. I did my time, and
It's like I
I've
did my time.
graduated. I have done my time. I graduated to superintendent, but I give many, many props to campus level administrators. They have the hardest job. And so I really defer to them when it comes to, opinions about what works. And so that conference, there were a lot of principals there, and it was a really great opportunity to hear from people who were making it
Mm.
really work. Like they knew they could spit data, which I love when they can tell you we've had X number percentage of increase in this or that. Like they knew the stats for
Yeah.
what it was doing for them. And that means a lot to me.
No, makes total sense. So coming to the similar point, around purchasing, um, if you could share one piece of advice for edtech companies or vendors,
Hmm.
like what do you wish they understood better about working with schools like yours? What is that way of working which is not obvious, but you wish vendors knew it more?
Um, Gosh, I don't know how helpful this would be. I mean, I think what they need to understand is the people that they need to sell this to are going to be campus level administrators, and then they're going to have to and they're going to have to talk to their superintendents and whomever. Um, they really have to bring data showing that it works. And we're very, very busy. I have to say, salespeople just annoy me to no end. When I feel like I'm getting a sales pitch,
Mm,
I really just want to like you just want to sell me your program. You got to lead with, what's in it for me.
mm,
Um, in terms of my student success and that sort of thing. So just coming, I don't want to hear about all the features. I think that vendors tend to lead with the features when what we really want to know is what's the result?
mm,
Like lead with the results. So if you're telling me that 4 out of 5 schools are using this because they got a 75% increase in or closed the gap by 50% in their sped or whatever, then now you've tweaked my interest. But if you're like, it's got 72 buttons and you can have it on your phone and your iPad and I don't care about all of
yeah.
that. If it's not going to, I don't care how many bells or whistles or how much money you've put into it to make it shiny.
Mm,
If it doesn't work, then it doesn't get my interest. And I really want you to get to that quickly because my time is so valuable
yeah.
that sometimes it's really hard to sit through presentations with people and their products because it's like, just please tell me what it does for me. And
Yeah.
then backwards, go back to, then I'm going to ask you questions about, well, how does it work?
Hmm. No, makes sense. I think a lot of times I've heard this news that this statement that I'm buying results, not the curriculum, or I'm buying results, not the tools. So
Absolutely. I'm not buying the product. I'm buying the
yeah,
results the product is going to bring me.
absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Uh, okay, what the current budget situation looks like? This is the hottest topic that I have heard a lot of school leaders have a lot of opinions on. So, what's the current budget situation look like? And also around new
Uh,
projects that you're taking up.
yeah. Well, it's funny. I literally, prior to this podcast, I am taking a break for this podcast from my budget for a minute. And when I'm done, I will be going
I'm
right
so
back
sorry,
to my
so sorry.
budget. That spreadsheet is in front of my face right here, right now. I'm looking at it like, oh, goodness, it's so daunting. For us in Texas, we just had our legislature end on June 2nd, and they made a lot of changes that they have not quite vetted out yet for us in details. So we're doing the best we can to try to figure things out. Of course, the federal situation with all the cuts in federal grants is very daunting and scary.
Yeah.
So we have that on the back of our mind. But I will tell you that going through software programs and hardware needs is next to salaries
Hmm.
is the next biggest conversation that we have because first you need teachers. So we talk about that in the budget. But then the very next thing that you have to talk about, I mean, the bills are given, right? Like I'm going to have to pay the electric and the water and all of that. You can calculate that pretty quickly
Hmm.
off the top. But then when you start looking at your discretionary dollars, salaries first, and then immediately after that, it's tools for teachers. So then what is the curriculum going to be? What do I need to purchase? And that includes software programs to support that curriculum.
Right.
And then what hardware needs am I going to have in
Hmm.
order to be able to do those softwares? So those are very, very big conversations in the budget. And then everything else is after that, like, okay, we're going to buy X number of pens and
Hmm.
staples and all the things.
No, and you specifically mentioned since your particular school has 75% of lower socioeconomic background. So I'm assuming,
Mhm.
it's just my guess, but I think 25 to 30% of your funds must be federal directed, right? Or maybe higher.
Um, Most of our funds actually come from the state, but yes, we do get a very large, like we're a Title I school.
Mhm.
So, but those funds were decreased this year too,
Yeah.
which was difficult. So, we do get some state funding, we get, some title funding, we get some federal funding. But the largest chunk of our budget comes from our state.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, no, actually I've done that analysis. It's usually 2 to 10% of like on an average coming from federal, 90%
Hmm.
state. But for some particular schools, the percentage can be as high as 30% or 40%, especially
Yeah,
in the
yeah.
socioeconomic poorer background neighborhoods. So yeah, I can just say all the best. This is tough times and very like a
Yeah.
I would say not even tough. It's more uncertain times, and uncertainty is more.
Yes.
So if you really like, if, like a lot of school leaders are like, if I knew that I'm gonna get 70% of what I got last time, it's still better than not knowing what I'm gonna get.
Yes, absolutely. The unknown is the worst because once I know, then, we've gone through this. We've already all year long, been very, very detailed in managing our budget. So when you get to building a new budget, you really already have an idea of what you need. In fact, I just attended a certification training with the Texas Association of School Board Officers and working on my certification as a business officer and the finances and taking several finance classes. And one of the questions they asked was, what's harder to budget for, revenues or expenditures?
Hmm.
And it's absolutely revenues.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Expenditures, you get an idea, you get quotes from vendors, you know what your utilities were and the cost of inflation, and you can do those pretty quickly. But with the sources of funding coming in, it's always a little more iffy.
Yeah. So absolutely. So that brings me to my last question around AI. So if we like fast forward a bit, and if you could describe an ideal school environment or a classroom experience, let's say 3 years from now, where AI will be
Mhm.
effectively supporting both teachers and students. So what would that ideal situation look like to you?
The ideal situation, I think, would be that both teachers and students and parents, I would add parents into that, have a clear understanding of the role of AI. I think that's where the gap is right now, is we have this thing, but we
Hmm.
don't really know its role. And so I think it's clearly defined that this is what we use AI for. This is how we use it. This is what it can do for us. I mean, I look at it when I first started teaching, I'd have 30 students in a class and me.
Hmm.
So if 30 hands went up, then 29 were waiting all the time.
Yeah.
So the ideal classroom to me is that no one's ever waiting. That if
Hmm.
you have a question, you have an answer.
Yeah.
And that you know how to, as you said, Google search is an art, that you know how to search independently to get that answer without, I think the way we teach is really going to change. We've been very content focused, and
Hmm.
I think we're going to have to be more skill focused
Right.
in teaching students the skills to gather information and get the answers to their questions versus just learning answers and
Hmm.
trying to memorize things because that's passe. It's done.
Yeah. No, agreed. So yeah, this was fantastic, Leslie. So Dr. S. And
Yes.
I think like I don't like to pander around this topic in a much more generic way, and I think you were on point with literally all the questions. So thank you so much.
Sure.
Yeah,
Happy
I'm
to help.
gonna I'm gonna stop recording.